right? They could have an extreme reaction to it because it would make them uncomfortable. That's what's interesting.
Supermodels once stood before a photographer so powerful they had no choice but to comply with his demands. A man whose signature white wall studio became both the backdrop for fashion's most iconic images and the setting for allegations that would eventually destroy him. For over 2 decades, Terry Richardson shot the biggest names in fashion: Kate Moss, Gisele Bündchen, Miranda Kerr.
It seems that you're not a model unless you get photographed by Terry Richardson. Now,
while the industry that celebrated his edgy aesthetic turned a blind eye to what was really happening behind those stark white walls, this is the story of fashion's most controversial photographer, how he crossed every line imaginable and why it took so long for anyone to stop him. Terry Richardson arrived in fashion photography carrying the ghost of his father's legacy. Bob Richardson had been a revolutionary 1960s fashion photographer before mental illness derailed his career. His son Terry, born in 1965, grew up surrounded by fashion's chaos. Mother a stylist, father a troubled genius. Terry tried punk rock first. The music didn't work out, but the rebellious spirit stuck when he picked up a camera in the early 1990s. His breakthrough came in 1994 with a street-style spread for Vibe magazine. The images looked almost accidental, like snapshots from a party rather than a professional shoot. Fashion editors, exhausted by the overly produced aesthetic of the early 90s, saw something revolutionary in Richardson's raw approach. By 1995, designer Catherine Hamnett hired him for her spring campaign, a shoot that would establish Richardson's reputation as fashion's new provocateur. The campaign featured models in mini skirts with visible pubic hair, shocking even the fashion world's jaded elite. Rather than destroying his career, this controversy made Richardson the photographer everyone wanted to work with. Marc Jacobs, Tom Ford, Yves Saint Laurent, they all came calling. His style became instantly recognizable. That stark white background, the overexposed flash that made everything look slightly surreal.
Like, oh wow, he takes pictures of people next to a white wall.
And an energy that felt dangerous.
That's tantalizing. Wow, that's amazing.
Fashion magazines like Vogue, GQ, and Harper's Bazaar began featuring his work regularly. People magazine would later note that his candid approach was welcomed as shaking up campaigns with an edgy, erotic energy that felt fresh, compared to the glossy perfection that dominated the decade. Richardson understood something fundamental about the fashion industry. It desperately wanted to feel rebellious while remaining fundamentally commercial. His aesthetic offered both: images that looked spontaneous and rule-breaking but could still sell luxury handbags and designer jeans. The white wall became his trademark, a blank canvas where anything could happen. What the industry didn't realize, or chose not to see, was that this aesthetic philosophy, anything goes in pursuit of the perfect shot, would extend far beyond just the visual style. By 2004, Richardson had evolved from fashion photographer to something more complex: part artist, part provocateur, part participant in his own work. His book, Terry World, released that year, shattered any remaining boundaries between commercial photography and explicit content. The book didn't just feature nude models, it documented Richardson engaging in actual intimate acts with his subjects, all presented as art. The fashion world's reaction was revealing. Rather than recoiling, many industry insiders celebrated Richardson's fearlessness. One art director who frequently hired him later recalled that every contact sheet would feature the model with her top off, even when it wasn't required for the shoot.
I think that a lot of young women sort of find themselves sort of performing a role that is not necessarily coming from them, necessarily who they want to be, but there's a real pressure to kind of conform.
It had become Terry's thing, the art director explained. And once somebody pushes the envelope, taboo images quickly become acceptable. Fashion, he added, needed people like Terry to maintain its edge.
You know, it's natural to be naked. It's not like, you know, it's a certain art, right? People are always very shocked by that. But yes, like to me, I think it's absolutely sacred.
Richardson himself defended these sessions as consensual collaborations. He told The Guardian that everyone had fun on his shoots, that he would never ask anyone to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He often got naked too, he explained, and would hand the camera to models to make the atmosphere feel playful and equal. By creating what he called a vibe of spontaneity and permissiveness, Richardson claimed magical things could happen in front of the camera.
It's an energy people respond to, and an image, or they want to be part of it, or they like the way someone looks, or and that's what I think, and that's on a more human level.
This framing, inappropriate conduct recast as artistic experimentation, became Richardson's shield. One notorious thread in this era was the collapsing of boundaries between photographer and subject. Richardson's books and exhibitions featured explicit acts in which he participated on camera, presented as art rather than exploitation. The shock value became part of his brand, and the industry, keen to burnish its avant-garde credentials, mostly went along. The white walls of Richardson's studio had become a space where normal professional boundaries didn't apply. Models would arrive expecting a fashion shoot and find themselves in situations that had nothing to do with the clothes they were supposedly there to photograph.
He makes you feel like you're being a prude or you're somehow weird if you're not willing to just go with the flow because it's all cool, it's all fine. And
Richardson had successfully created an environment where extreme behavior was normalized under the guise of artistic freedom. As he himself said, agreeing with those who called him a necessary rebel, "Somebody's got to come up once in a while and say bollocks to all that mainstream glamour." While Richardson's public persona grew more celebrated through the 2000s, a different story circulated privately among models and their agencies. 2 lawsuits filed in 2005 should have served as warning signs, but instead they were resolved out of court, leaving only whispers in their wake. Gabriela Johansson, a Romanian model, sued Richardson for fraud and invasion of privacy after a shoot at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. She had agreed to what she thought was a test shoot for her portfolio, but found Richardson pushing into increasingly explicit territory. When she later discovered images published without her permission, she alleged a pattern of tricking vulnerable models, especially those new to the industry or with limited English, into signing releases under false pretenses. That same year, 17-year-old Frank LaPera filed his own complaint. The male model said Richardson manipulated him during a supposed test session at the photographer's home, aggressively urging him to fully undress despite his age and lack of a signed release. LaPera was shocked to find those explicit images in Richardson's Terry World book, published without consent. Both cases were reportedly settled, with few details made public. The fashion world continued as if nothing had happened. Richardson was simultaneously photographing high-profile figures, Barack Obama for Vibe in 2007, and Oprah Winfrey for Harper's Bazaar, while models passed warnings to each other in hushed conversations. Agencies faced an impossible choice: refuse to send models to one of fashion's most powerful photographers and risk being excluded, or send young women into situations that everyone suspected were problematic. The contradiction was stark. By day, Richardson was photographing some of the most powerful people in the world. By night, industry insiders were warning 19-year-old models about what might happen at his studio. Jenna Sowers, a model turned writer at Jezebel, would later observe that Richardson's behavior had been an open secret for a long time. Many were disturbed by his history, but because of his high status, people tolerated it in public while acknowledging the exploitation in private. This whisper network, informal, inconsistent, and ultimately inadequate, became the fashion industry's solution to the Terry Richardson problem. Rather than addressing the issue directly, the industry created a shadow system where some models might receive warnings while others walked into his studio unprepared. It was a system that protected the industry's reputation more than it protected the models themselves.
When I was going for a casting, I had already seen his books. I was very well aware of who he was, so I was prepared. But my agency also poised me, being like, you know, this guy, he's a really good photographer. If you shoot with him, it's gonna take you this, and there, and, you know, obviously you wanna make a good impression.
The silence finally broke in 2010, not through official channels, but through direct confrontation. Ree Rasmussen, a Danish supermodel turned filmmaker, spotted Richardson at a Paris Fashion Week party and decided she'd had enough. At the La Montana nightclub in front of fashion's elite, Rasmussen told Richardson exactly what she thought of him. What you do is completely degrading to women," she told him, not bothering to lower her voice. "You only get away with it because you have a camera, lots of fashion contacts, and get your pictures in Vogue." She accused him of targeting young, vulnerable girls who were too afraid to say no. According to Rasmussen, Richardson's response was to literally run out of the club. The next day, he called her modeling agency to complain that she had insulted him in front of clients, what Rasmussen called the most cowardly thing she had ever seen. The confrontation made headlines, first in the New York Post's page 6, then internationally. It opened a floodgate. Jamie Peck, an American writer and former model, came forward with her own story from when she was 19. During a nude photo shoot, Richardson had made a bizarre request involving her tampon, treating her body like a prop for his amusement. He then removed his own clothes and pressured her into performing an intimate act while his assistant photographed everything. Peck's account, published on the Gloss blog and later Jezebel, characterized Richardson as a predator with a camera. The specificity of her story, the age 19 appearing again, the progression from professional to deeply inappropriate, the presence of an assistant who enabled rather than intervened, established a pattern that would become sickeningly familiar. Coco Rocha, one of fashion's most successful models, made her own statement that year. Though more diplomatic than Rasmussen, her message was clear. She had worked with Richardson once, didn't feel comfortable, and would never shoot with him again. When someone of Rocha's stature publicly refuses a photographer, it sends a message through the industry. Yet, even as these women spoke out, Richardson continued booking major campaigns. That same year, he was chosen to shoot the prestigious Pirelli calendar, one of fashion photography's most coveted assignments. The industry's response to the allegations seemed to be a collective shrug. Models were speaking, but was anyone really listening? By 2014, the fashion world could no longer pretend ignorance. Charlotte Waters, then 24, posted an anonymous Reddit account about a horrifying experience with a famous photographer when she was 19. Though she didn't initially name Richardson, the details made his identity obvious. When she went public with Vocative and Jezebel, her story sent shockwaves through the industry. Waters described arriving for what she thought was a normal modeling shoot. Instead, Richardson allegedly instructed her to perform intimate acts while he and his female assistant watched and photographed. She described feeling like a robot, complying with commands even as he called her his puppet and posed her in increasingly degrading positions. When she tried to report the incident to New York police, she was told that because she had technically never said no, it might not qualify as assault under the law. New York Magazine's April 2014 cover story asked the question directly: is Terry Richardson an artist or a predator? The investigation uncovered more disturbing accounts. Sarah Ziff, founder of the Model Alliance advocacy group, recalled Richardson pressuring her to pose topless during what she thought was a casual meeting when she was 19.
And it goes beyond taking off your top. We're talking about,
Yes.
Nice.
serious, allegations of sexual assault and abuse.
Liskila Cohen walked off a Vogue shoot when Richardson asked her to simulate intimate acts with another female model. Sana Czech described being told to grab Richardson's genitals while cameras snapped away. She was 19 and felt she had no choice. Richardson finally responded with a Huffington Post op-ed titled "Correcting the Rumors." He called the allegations a vicious and distorted witch hunt, insisting he was always considerate and respectful of his models. He compared his work to that of Robert Mapplethorpe and Helmut Newton, photographers renowned for blending sensuality and art. He painted himself as an artist unfairly maligned for his provocative imagery. The fashion industry found itself at a crossroads. H&M stated by late 2013 that it was no longer working with Richardson. Some magazines quietly stopped booking him, while others continued as if nothing had changed. Harper's Bazaar US featured his photos of Miranda Kerr for a 2015 cover. Diesel retained him for campaigns in 2016, and he shot Kylie Jenner's 2017 calendar.
A lot of success unfortunately comes with some backlash, and the beauty queen received just that when she praised controversial photographer Terry Richardson for her sexy 2017 calendar.
The industry still couldn't decide whether his behavior was indefensible or just the price of working with someone it once labeled a provocative genius. Everything changed on October 23, 2017. The Harvey Weinstein scandal had broken earlier that month, launching the Me Too movement and fundamentally shifting how society viewed powerful men accused of misconduct. In fashion, people immediately drew parallels to Terry Richardson, who some had already dubbed fashion's Weinstein. Condé Nast, one of fashion's most powerful publishers, sent an internal email that leaked almost immediately. COO James Woolhouse's message was blunt. All magazines were to stop working with Richardson immediately. Any completed but unpublished shoots should be killed and substituted with other material. This marked not a slow transition, but an abrupt and absolute break from one of fashion's most prolific photographers. Within 24 hours, the dominoes fell rapidly. Valentino and Bulgari announced they would not work with Richardson again. The Wall Street Journal magazine and Porter confirmed bans. Hearst magazines, which owned Harper's Bazaar and Elle, went so far as to reshoot an entire cover story for Elle's January 2018 issue, replacing Richardson's photos of actress Zoe Kravitz with work from another photographer. Richardson issued a statement expressing disappointment at being blacklisted after having addressed these old stories. He maintained, as always, that all subjects had participated consensually in his explicitly themed shoots. But in the post-Me Too climate, this defense rang hollow. The same industry that had tolerated and even celebrated his behavior for decades suddenly found him toxic to their brands. The speed of Richardson's fall was breathtaking. Within 48 hours, he went from one of fashion's most employed photographers to completely unemployable. Magazines that had defended him months earlier now rushed to distance themselves. In early January 2018, the NYPD's Special Victims Division reportedly opened an investigation and began contacting women who had come forward, though no charges followed. Fashion commentator Karen Franklin observed that Richardson had been treated as untouchable for years. Whatever he did in pursuit of his art was tolerated, and models were expected to comply or stay silent. The industry was now worried about brand damage, she noted, suggesting that companies were distancing themselves to avoid the smell of scandal, rather than from any genuine moral awakening. After all, there had been a lot of money riding on Richardson. He was paid millions over the years. Admitting the truth would mean acknowledging that many powerful people had enabled his behavior. Richardson retreated from public life almost immediately. He married his longtime assistant, Alexandra Bolatow, in 2017. The woman who'd participated in his explicit shoots and defended him publicly in 2014, saying women should own their decisions rather than blame Terry. They retreated to New York's Catskills region with their twin sons, born in 2016, away from the fashion world that had expelled them. The industry promised change. Sarah Ziff's Model Alliance launched new protection programs.
We established a discrete grievance reporting service. So our members, or any model, can contact us and we can provide assistance, we can give advice, we can field complaints, we can give you a lawyer if you need one.
They introduced codes of conduct explicitly prohibiting inappropriate behavior at photo shoots and created confidential reporting systems. The My Job Should Not Include Abuse campaign, started by model Cameron Russell on Instagram, collected anonymous accounts of abuse. Many stories were widely believed to reference Richardson. Supermodel Christy Turlington spoke plainly. Harassment and mistreatment had always been widely known and tolerated in the industry. The industry was surrounded by predators. More female photographers began rising to prominence, challenging the male gaze that had dominated fashion imagery. But the story wasn't over. In late November 2023, 6 years after Richardson's fall, New York's Adult Survivors Act temporarily lifted the statute of limitations for sexual assault claims. Minerva Portillo filed suit first, followed 2 days later by Karen Bernstein. Both women sought the justice the criminal system never delivered. Portillo's lawsuit alleged that Trump Model Management sent her to Richardson in 2004, instructing her to overlook his behavior when he appeared wearing only a robe. She described being given a drink that left her dizzy, followed by coercion and explicit photos taken without genuine consent. Bernstein's filing echoed her 2017 account of being forced into sexual acts during what was supposed to be a professional shoot. Richardson, through his lawyers, denied all allegations. Again, Terry Richardson's white walls are gone from fashion now, but the questions they raise remain. How does an industry that sells aspiration and beauty reconcile itself with the ugliness it harbored for so long? The fashion world knew about Richardson for years. Models warned each other, agencies gave coded advice, editors whispered concerns. Yet the machine kept running. It took an external scandal, a movement that started in Hollywood, to stop what fashion couldn't stop on its own. The most unsettling part isn't that Richardson crossed lines. It's that so many people knew he was crossing them and chose to look away. Every magazine that published his work after the first allegations, every brand that hired him despite the whispers, every agency that sent another 19-year-old to his studio with a warning to be careful, instead of refusing to send her at all. Richardson claimed his work was a consensual collaboration between adults exploring art's boundaries. His victims described something else entirely: a man who used his camera as a weapon, his reputation as a shield, and an industry's hunger for edge as permission to harm. The fashion world eventually chose to believe the victims, but only when believing them became less costly than ignoring them. Today, Richardson lives in obscurity, while his accusers still fight for recognition of what they endured. The industry has implemented new safeguards, elevated different voices, promised to do better. Whether fashion has truly learned its lesson, or simply learned to hide its problems better, remains an open question. What's certain is this: somewhere right now, there's a young model at the beginning of her career, full of dreams about magazine covers and campaigns. The industry owes her more than whisper networks and coded warnings. It owes her an environment where talent behind the camera never becomes an excuse for exploitation in front of it. It owes her the protection that Charlotte Waters, Jamie Peck, Minerva Portillo, and too many others never received. The white walls are gone. The question is whether the culture that enabled what happened against them has truly changed, or merely painted them a different color.